A Farewell to Arms, 1932, movie review. So this is a review of the movie. It's not a review of the book, but I'll say some brief words about the book by way of background. I had to read A Farewell to Arms in high school. I think it was 11th grade. And I think that's fairly common, right? This is a commonly assigned book in American high schools. I didn't really like it at the time, and it put me off of Hemingway for about a good 10 years. But I did later in life pick up and enjoy some Hemingway. The Sun Also Rises, which I've reviewed on this channel, which I really liked. And For Whom the Bell Tolls, which I've also reviewed on this channel, which I really liked. In fact, after I saw For Whom the Bell Tolls, after I read For Whom the Bell Tolls, I rented the movie to see how that would compare. The 1943, I think it was 1943 movie, starring Gary Cooper, which is, well, I don't want to review that movie. I thought it was good for the most part, a few differences from the book. But interesting thing, I was watching the movie, and I was watching it with my girlfriend at the time. This was a number of years ago. This was when I was living in Japan. And she really fell in love with Gary Cooper, who was the star of that movie. So she went on this Gary Cooper kick where she tracked down a bunch of old DVDs of Gary Cooper, including another Hemingway book turned into a movie, For Whom the Bell Tolls, which was made in 1932. So yeah, apparently Gary Cooper is quite a good-looking man, or I guess certain women appreciate him at least. So this was just laying around the apartment for ages afterwards, and I finally just watched it one afternoon. I had a friend over, and we were just hanging out, and we were having coffee, and we had 2 hours until we were meeting our other friends. And I said, "You want to watch a movie?" And we were looking through the DVDs, and he said, "Yeah, let's put this on." So we put it on, and here I am with the review. Now, I don't have a lot of intelligent things to say about this movie. The DVD we got in Japan was one of those cheap public domain DVDs. In Japan, they sell movies that are in the public domain. You can get them like at the supermarket rack for real cheap, or at least you could back when I lived there. Now, it's interesting because some of the movies that they have in the public domain in Japan, like some of those early Disney movies, are not in the public domain back in the US. And I'm not an expert on public domain law, but I can only assume it's because it's different in every country. I was looking this particular movie up on Wikipedia just now, though, and apparently this is in the public domain in the US as well. That is A Farewell to Arms, 1932. Because nobody bothered to renew it when the license came up in 1960. So it's been in the public domain ever since. So, yeah, what to say about this movie? It's a 1932 movie, so like it's an old movie. Like movies were only just beginning to have sound back then. And it's showing its age, unfortunately, in a number of ways. The version I watched was not great. Like the audio was really staticky and popping and, you know, that cackling sound. And that may be because I'm told that when a movie goes into public domain, then that takes away the financial incentive to restore it. So some of these old 1930s movies that are not in the public domain get restored and cleaned up and re-released. This movie was not restored and cleaned up, so it's looking a bit rough. The picture is looking a bit dull and faded. The cuts are rough and jumpy, which I'm told is also a consequence of not being restored. I don't know, apparently like the cuts between reels got shorter over time, or I don't know. So yeah. The movie's not in great condition, at least the version I saw. I don't know if there are better versions out there. But there are some nice things about it. There's some inventive camera shots. Seems like pretty inventive stuff for 1932. For example, when the main character is wounded and he's carried into the hospital on a stretcher, we see the whole scene through his eyes, like the camera is pointed up as if the audience is in the one on the stretcher. I thought that was kind of cool. If you can get over the crackling audio soundtrack, the dialogue in the movie is actually pretty good, and I suspect much of it is lifted directly from the book. I don't actually remember the book that well enough to comment, but the conversations between the characters seem very real and natural, which I guess what Hemingway's dialogue was supposed to be famous for. Yeah, and that's my review. Sorry, I don't have really much intelligent to say about this movie. If anyone knows if there are any better versions of this movie floating around, let me know.